Hello and welcome to Daily Records, and we are moving through the Beatles for the month of July, and we are talking about some solo Beatles, and we talked about John, Paul. So next we have George, and this is his debut solo album, or the first solo album after the Beatles. This is All Things Must Pass. Now, here is a very interesting thing. And a little backstory. This was released on November 27th, 1970, same year that the Beatles announced their breakup, the same year that John and Paul released their solo albums. And so George made a statement. And boy, did he make a statement. As you can tell, this is a huge box. I say huge. It's a triple album set. And so George really had a lot to say. Now, here's a little history. I mean, the Beatles kind of had this format of George Harrison and his contribution to the Beatles. And the format was usually of the 14 tracks on a Beatles album, Harrison would get 2 of them, and Ringo would sing lead on 1. And they really followed this format even on the White Album. There's 4 Harrison songs, 2 Ringos, the rest is Lennon McCartney. But if you listen to Abbey Road, some of the best material on Abbey Road came from George. By this point, George Harrison had really blossomed as a songwriter, and he was sitting on a huge backlog of great songs. And so he set about recording them. Now, technically, and I want to clarify, this is his 3rd solo album. This is the first one he released after the breakup of the Beatles. Now, it does have a lot of his influence. People like Bob Dylan, the band, Delaney and Bonnie, Billy Preston. A lot of people that were kind of working with George or hanging around with George during this time. Now, originally, and this is an original release, as you can tell by probably some of the markings on it, because it's got some age. There were 2 LPs worth of songs. The 3rd disc was called Apple Jams, and they were basically just some jam sessions that was recorded. So really, as far as new material, it's probably more of a double album set. Now, he started recording at Abbey Road in May of 1970, and he did a lot of overdubbing and mixing throughout October, and including some of his buddies who played on the album. There's Eric Clapton, along with Delaney and Bonnie's Friends band that kind of made up what became Derek and the Dominoes. Ringo stars on the album. Gary Wright, Billy Preston, Klaus Voormann, John Barham, Badfinger is on this album, and Pete Drake. And so there is a lot of material that was recorded for this. However, when the album came out, it was critically and commercially very successful. It went to number 1. Album was co-produced by Phil Spector, and so this album does, unlike John Lennon's album, this does employ the wall of sound that Phil Spector was known for. Big productions, and so it was a big sort of coming out party for George Harrison, and rightfully so. I remember a good friend of mine, when he first heard this album, he exclaimed, John and Paul should be ashamed, because there were so many great songs on here. Now, just really quick, let's talk a little bit about a few of the songs. One that you probably know very well, My Sweet Lord, which was a big hit. He does a song with Bob Dylan, I'd Have You Anytime, a song that he co-wrote with Bob Dylan. You've probably heard Wah Wah, Isn't It a Pity, What Is Life, which gets a lot of radio play. He also covers a Dylan song, If Not For You, from the New Morning album by Bob Dylan. A beautiful ballad, Behind That Locked Door. Really wonderful spiritual song. Beware of Darkness, Waiting on You All, and then the title track, All Things Must Pass. There's 2 versions of Isn't It a Pity, so if one wasn't enough. Now, the Apple Jam, the 3rd disc, or the 3rd record, not as essential as the rest of it, but it's interesting because George certainly wasn't about to skip out on shortchanging any of the fans. a really, really worthy album. One of the best solo Beatles albums. It holds up even under the heavy production of Phil Spector. It still sounds really, really nice. If you're a fan of people like Dylan and the band, the early Clapton, this is an album it will not disappoint you. So today's Daily Record, All Things Must Pass by George Harrison. Like, comment, subscribe, share. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter. It's TommyBurton75. In the meantime, I'll see you all again tomorrow with another Daily Record.